Welcome back to Corralling the Chaos. Today's topic is something that we often take for granted, it's often misunderstood, rarely thought about, but really valuable when you least expect it. And what spawned this topic was recently hearing about a couple of horror stories from some of our friends in the event industry who unfortunately learned a very hard lesson when it comes to being underinsured or underwritten incorrectly. And it's painful to watch, obviously, from the sideline. So I can only imagine what it's like when you're actually living that. And you've worked so hard to protect something just to find out it's not properly protected. So today I've asked Jason Packham to enlighten us on this topic. And Jason is an entertainment insurance broker with NFP, which is an Aon company. He specializes in live events, festivals, AV production, rental houses, and TV and film. He started his career on the entertainment side, where he worked in production and development at Sony. And then he's been with NFP for going on 7 years. And NFP Entertainment insures over 3,000 entities in the entertainment space and was recently acquired by Aon this past summer. So welcome, Jason.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Angela. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too. Thanks for joining us. I know you and I have kind of run into each other at a couple of events over the past. So I know we share a lot of the same customers, which is always great to see. But again, kind of what spawned this conversation is I've just recently been talking to some of our friends in the industry, and I've just been kind of hearing over and over these things that happen where they're getting caught off guard. And insurance in our industry isn't always very straightforward. So I was hoping you could kind of help us unpack that today. But as you think about your career in the last 7 or so years in the entertainment space, what are some of the most common surprises that you've seen when it comes to companies not really understanding what's necessarily needed?
Yeah, well, I would say that one of the big things I find is most insureds that I end up, most people don't think that there's actually insurance brokers that specialize in entertainment. So they go to their local broker and, they have a florist, a barber, and, an AV company. And so they just don't know how they operate. They don't really know kind of the issues that they may have. And I think the biggest misconception is that, like your homeowners, people just think, oh, it's covered. I have insurance, so this is covered, that's covered. And, the operations are different, and they don't always have the coverage. And another big thing that I'll see is just the types of coverage. So a lot of our AV event people have equipment that goes in and out, right? So it goes, and so I'll find out that they only have BPP, which stands for business personal property. And that means your property is covered at your location or within 1,000 feet usually. But it's going to venues, it's going to events all over the country, and they don't realize that they need an inland or equipment floater policy to cover that and make sure that it's covered, when it's out and about, so. And I think that, we'll see a lot of times too, is that some of the big issues I have with insureds is they are like, I have insurance in place, right? So I don't need to worry about my client having insurance. Or looking at a contract from a client that's saying, and if you go into a hotel, it's guaranteed a Hilton or a Marriott is going to be like, we're not responsible for anything. And you're at an event there for 3 days. Well, yeah, you're going to be controlling it during the event, but what about at night, right? What about when they have, and that is the number one thing I see in the event space as far as claims. It's always a lot of times you'll see at a hotel, and, just think about a hotel. The people working there, the turnover rate is crazy. They're getting minimum wage. So, they're in on it 95% of the time. And so, they slide somebody they know, hey, there's an event here. There's several, $50,000 cameras set up. Here's my swipe card. And a camera is very easy to steal because, less than 5 pounds and can be gone like that. So, one of the big things I tell my insureds is when they have a contract with a client is making sure that if you're not going to give me coverage, then at least I'm going to bill you for security. If you're not going to put up insurance to cover my equipment when, I'm not there, I want you to pay for me to put up security so that I don't have a claim. Because again, you most likely have insurance to cover that. But when your insurance is paying for other people's issues and your rates go up, that's obviously very frustrating, because we are in a market where the insurance is not cheap anyway. It's never, it's always going up. Everybody's blaming inflation, everybody, and all the which is catastrophes that are happening in our world today with wildfires, tornadoes, hurricanes, whatever, that it's just become a thing where, yes, you're going to pay for it, but you're going to pay a lot more if you file a $50,000 claim.
So what kind of theft insurance do they think they have? Are you saying that they are making the assumption that they have theft insurance that covers them when they're at a client site?
So they likely do have coverage when they're at a client site if they have an inland marine policy. So the inland marine is going to cover your equipment pretty much inland, anywhere on land. If it's on a boat going overseas, then that's ocean marine. But if it's inland, and that also usually includes air, like if you fly it somewhere, trucking, well, that's another misleading one, is people will have inland marine and they'll have a sublimit. So let's say they have $10 million worth of equipment. They have a $10 million policy, but they don't read the fine print, and their transit, which is when it's getting moved, is only at a $500,000 limit. So I've had insureds do this where they're trucking a $1.5 million LED wall across the country for an event. And I'm like, well, so either you need to put that in 3 different trucks and then separate those by a 10-minute. Because you have 500,000 in transit. So as long as they don't run into each other and cause a million, you'll have the coverage, but it's best to get a policy that's covering you for a full limit on transit, which can be hard to do, or you have to up your limit when you're doing some kind of haul like that. But you have to look at all of that, and having a carrier that understands that, having someone in the, it's just kind of like when you go and you have a plumbing problem, it's not like you just call a contractor. You want to find someone that specializes in plumbing.
Do you see that a lot of companies in our industry are utilizing brokers like yourself that really understand the nuances of the industry, or are a lot of people coming to you because they've made the mistake of, just going to a generic broker who really doesn't understand any of the nuances of our industry?
Well, yeah. So, I mean, it's probably 75 has a broker that, is in their neighborhood or gave them the best price, right? And then the other, it might even be more 80-20, but so I do see a lot of people that are insured with a broker that doesn't understand the industry. And they usually, when I start talking to them about their equipment, they're like, oh yeah, my guy doesn't know what we do, so that's obviously a win for me. And then it becomes kind of also then getting them to understand where they have their issues or where they have their concerns, because we all have different stresses, right? Some people love to go to Vegas. Some people are afraid to walk outside, so that is where as a broker, you want to talk to the insured, find out where they have their concerns, what keeps them up at night, and make sure that you address those things. And a lot of times, like you said, you will not know until you hear about it. Hopefully it doesn't happen to you. Hopefully it happened to someone that and you heard the story and it resonated enough to go, oh, I should look into that.
We don't know what we don't know. And I feel like, especially with insurance, I mean, even I have a 18-year-old son and a soon-to-be 16-year-old daughter. Even my car insurance, understanding the devil and the details of having teenage drivers, like what I assumed would happen and what actually happened are 2 very different things. And again, that's just a simple automobile insurance coverage. So I can only imagine, these businesses where it's not just insuring the asset, it's loss of use, right? And even to your point about dividing a 1.5 million shipment across 3 trucks to make sure you're fully insured, right? Otherwise, they're thinking of course it's insured, right? Because who takes the time to really read the details. The impact of not doing that is so great. So anything that we can do to kind of highlight the things of, just the biggest gotchas.
So what will happen is they'll have a big client or a large venue that they go into, and they'll be like, you need E&O errors and admissions insurance, or you need a $10 million umbrella, and because they're basically in their contract giving that out to every vendor that they have. And so, I will tell insureds, let's give them a certificate of insurance showing them what you have, and then see, because like usually it's what you have as standard for the market and for, what you do, and then see, as opposed to getting quotes for, $5 million more of umbrella, which could be 15, 20 grand, or E&O, which could be 10. And like, it's like, you're wanting this job so bad that you're not kind of pushing back. And I've never, ever had an insured lose a job because they said, hey, I don't have that. Can you give me a scenario where I would need that coverage? Usually E&O is kind of like, just to make it simple for our listeners, would be like a lawyer, like malpractice, medical. E&O on the event side is one where, if you're doing something as a marketing company and they're basically paying you to run their Instagram account, let's say, obviously you're doing it and they're giving you free reign, well, then you wouldn't necessarily need E&O. But a lot of times, like with our guys doing events, they're running content that is actually being given to them by the client that's already been vetted. They put it together. We're just putting it out there for a virtual. It's kind of hard to go, I need E&O for, for this or that. And most of my insureds too is like when they're doing an event and they, an E&O would be something where they obviously lost income for their client. So it's not like a liability coverage. It's basically something where, and then you go, well, if you have a power outage, well, that's likely from the venue. It's not on you. So that was that on me, so getting these coverages, they're always good to have, but we also don't always have the money to just be like, oh, you know what? Insure me for every single thing that's out there,
So what do you recommend companies do? Like, what's the steps that they need to take to make sure they're properly insured, even down to like how often should they be auditing their policies and reviewing, right? Because their business is changing every year. So just because they had 2 years ago doesn't necessarily mean that's going to be adequate for today. So what recommendations would you make for them?
I mean, I think it's definitely, obviously I'm pitching myself, but, it's like having a broker that's in your niche is definitely, it is beneficial, but not all of us are the same, but I do think that kind of, to me, it is one where it's like, learn from your mistakes and learn from your, peers. That's why like we know each other through an association that gets together and they kind of share misfortunes or, best business practices. One of the things I was going to mention too is there's a company or an association called the Event Safety Alliance. I don't know if you've heard of it, but those are ones where like they have information out the wazoo. A lot of times it's for big, if you're doing festivals, shootings, accidents, crowd, this and that. And, some of our event guys do it on the smaller scale. They don't have weather. They're in a hotel. They don't have crowds to worry about. But there's information that will give you, they have checklists. They have all kinds of stuff on the Event Safety Alliance website. And it's a great organization. They get together a couple times a year and just kind of talk about scenarios and how they kind of plan them out. So that's always good. And most of our event people, and if they have lasso, like they're doing something on keeping a solid inventory list, right? That's also key. I'll go through one thing that I see a lot of times when someone's been around forever and they had $20 million worth of equipment. I'm like, let's go through that list because I'm guessing that you have stuff on there that you just never taken off, that you don't use anymore. It's in the event space. If it's 20 years old, obviously, it's very unlikely that you're using it at this time, So you could be insuring it and you don't need to. Looking at, penny saved is a penny earned. I have a lot of people in the entertainment world that are, more creative minds. So they're like, let's figure out ways to make money. They don't really think about ways to save money, So, and that was a big thing for me during the pandemic, was going like, okay, now's a time that we can go through. Obviously nothing's coming in. So let's try and figure out how we can
clean up our house. Yeah.
Exactly. So
we also see when we onboard people to Lasso, because one of the things we do is calculate like the payroll fringe, which workers' comp is a big part of that. It's always entertaining to see some of these declaration pages and how these companies are being categorized. They're either in a completely off-the-wall SIC code, because again, the broker didn't understand, and I know our industry doesn't have our own SIC code. But I've just seen some really interesting workers' comp codes where, they're considered furniture builders.
And that's in Pennsylvania, where they do classify them as that. And I've fought their workers' comp board on that, but that is where it goes for them, which is, but there are ones where, and most people don't know, but in our industry, in the event space, most of the guys, the techs or anybody doing setup, tear down, should be technically considered, I don't want to give away all my secrets, but 9154, which is theaters not otherwise sponsored. And that's one where people like, well, I don't work at a theater. And it's like, but in the mind of, because there isn't an actual event code, it's basically like what you're doing as an event. You're setting it up. You're just in a different venue than a theater, but you have stage tech, direction, cameras, lights, props, whatever it may be. So, that is usually the one that I see the biggest, where there'll be like an installation code. It's like, yeah, we're not, the Geek Squad at Best Buy, we're not installing this stuff. So there are ways to, and usually, what I'll tell insureds too is that like, what I'll see is either they're not classified correctly. And then when you do, they'll be like, oh my God, they have me as a consultant and I'm paying like $500 on a business owner's policy, like a BOP, which is like, you're not covered. Like, again, you might think in certain things you could be, but like, there's just so many instances in our industry where you can get pulled into. And that to me is the biggest thing, the misconception that most people have, which we talked about a little bit beforehand, was contracts. That is as important as your insurance policy is your contract. And, because what you want to make sure is that your client is indemnifying you, which is, holding you harmless. If there's a situation where you're in an event, let's say they overserve someone, well, you're doing the AV. But I could get pulled into that insurance policy because all we do is sue in this, and so making sure that you're getting indemnified where I'm not involved in this. So my client is going to defend me in that situation and take on, any insurance claim. And people just don't think of that. And yes, you have insurance, but when you have to use it for reasons that are not, that were not your fault, you're going to pay for it, and that's where you want to kind of go. And it's not cheap, it costs you 10 or 15 grand for the next 10 years.
So you talk about what they should expect from their clients in those contracts. Obviously, so many people in our industry are hiring vendors too, right? And they subcontract a lot of it out. What type of insurance should they be expecting from their vendors?
The same that they have. You should not accept less than what you currently carry, or it might even be more than you have. Like if you go into a venue, right? Like a lot of convention centers will be nowadays, it's like you can't go in with your $1 million of liability. You need at least $3 million umbrella. So if my vendor is someone I'm subcontracting to do some work at that event, they need to have it as well, because, God forbid there's a scenario, where a claim happens and it's over $1 million that was on the subcontractor, but he's only carrying $1 million, then you're going to get pulled in to cover that extra cost. So if you're signing a contract with a client or a venue, right, they're requiring you to carry a certain limit. So when you bring in a subcontractor that's doing something for you, that is being basically treated with the client as you. So if they don't have the coverage, then it's going to go on you. So, And, the big thing that I see a lot of times when we're talking about like with the labor, and it's kind of changing. I mean, I'm in California, so it changed a while ago where you're an employee, independent contractors are kind of, you're working on the hours I tell you, you're using my equipment, you're an employee, and people will want to fight that. I get it. Like, who wants to pay payroll tax on someone, if you don't have to? But it is one where, you have a guy that's been doing it for 20 years for you, and they have the best intentions as well. They're like, I'm not going to file a claim until they tear their ACL, $300,000. They don't have health insurance. Guess what they're going to do? They're going to get a lawyer and they're going to come after you. So, these are the things where it's like, I understand, but it is becoming a norm in the industry now where, everybody is kind of requiring their subcontractors to carry workers' comp or liability at least.
Is there insurance to protect against misclassification? Like, whoops, I thought I made this person a 1099 leave.
No, I mean, there's not real. I mean, obviously there's certain things that it becomes such a gray area, because people will be like asking me for insurance, like if their client doesn't pay. Right. And it's like, well, you can't get insurance because they breached a contract, which is breaking the law. And so you can't get insurance. Like, it's like, I can't get insurance to go and, off my neighbor, right? Like, it's just not possible. Like, so, and just the same as fraud. Like, I'm dealing with an insured right now who's having some issues, ownership issues. And one of the owners is kind of going crazy and they're trying to get insurance for them vandalizing the property. And I'm like, well, they're still an owner. So you'll not cover if the vandalism is if someone does it to you, not if you do it, right? Because that's one of the big things, and where we see a lot of, everyone talks about tornadoes and wildfires and everything, but there's just so much fraud in our industry. I mean, in every industry really, but where people, and that's makes all of our rates go up, right? Because, and so, the best way to do that is kind of hold, and that's where it would be lovely if you could get every event group to be like with a Hilton or a Marriott to be like, we're not signing your contract. The problem is somebody's going to do it.
I just think this is such an overlooked topic that I am certain we're going to get a lot of comments and feedback on, because I just think so many people misunderstand it and the stakes are just too high to roll the dice on that. So thank you, Jason, for joining us. I appreciate it. So where can people find you if they're interested in kind of consulting with you?
I work for NFP. I don't know if we can put out I'm on LinkedIn, Jason Packham, NFP. And, if anyone reaches out, we can definitely get them my email and contact information. Be more than happy to help anyone, even if it's just to be a question that they're like, hey, because I'll tell you if you're in the right place, if things are, because, it's just like your business. It's all relationships, just like the event business, right? If I try and get one job, it's going to be great for 3 days. And then they don't like me after that. Like, I'm building a relationship just like you guys are with your clients. So I'm more than happy to help, and give you the honest truths if you're solid or if you need to, second guess. So,
well, thanks so much for joining.
Absolutely. Have a good one. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, everybody, for listening in. If you like what you heard, don't forget to hit subscribe. And if you have any questions, comments, or feedback, reach out to us at podcast@lasso.io. Thanks, everyone.